What is up, everybody? It's your boy Carlos, and in today's workshop, we're going to be talking about toxic masculinity. Now, before we get into it today, I wanted to tell y'all that toxic masculinity is such a uh, broad topic. Not a broad topic. That's a better word for it. It is a huge topic right now, right? Toxic masculinity has a lot of different uh, subtopics. And so, if we were to include everything about toxic masculinity today, I feel like um, this PowerPoint would go on forever because there's just so much to dissect. There's so much to talk about. So, we're only going to be scratching the surface, if you will, on what toxic masculinity is. And so, without further ado, let's get right into it. So first off, I wanted to give you guys a definition of what toxic masculinity is. And R.W. Connell, she's an Australian sociologist that first came up with the term hegemonic. I'm having a hard time pronouncing this word. Hegemonic masculinity, also known as toxic masculinity. It is basically the practices that legitimizes powerful men's dominance position in society and justifies the subordination of the common male population of women and other marginalized ways of being a man. So that's what toxic masculinity means. Okay. Like I said before, at the beginning, we're only going to be dissecting 6 harmful effects of toxic masculinity, because I feel like these are the most important in today's society um, you know, that are harmful effects of toxic masculinity. So number 1, we're talking about the suppression of emotions. Number 2, the encouragement of violence. Number 3, the discouragement of seeking help. Number 4, the perpetuation of rape culture. Number 5, homophobia. And number 6, misogyny. So we're going to break those down one by one. So the suppression of emotions. So toxic masculinity dictates that all the emotion men can express, which is anger, which can hinder men from getting in touch with other things than their feelings. But I'm sorry. Toxic masculinity dictates the only emotion men can express is anger. Oh my God, I cannot speak today, guys. I'm so sorry. Let me start over. The suppression of emotions. Toxic masculinity dictates the only emotion men can express, which is anger, which can hinder men from getting in touch with other things than their feelings. Eventually, this can distance men from other people and keep them from developing close relationships with their partners and kids. One study in the social, psychological, and personality science even found that suppressing emotions can lead to aggression, which is a bad start to forming healthy relationships. Let's stop right here for a second. Let's break that down. I feel like this suppression of emotions in our society um, has been the reason why we have a lot of issues in our culture when it comes to being a man. I feel like suppression of emotions is kind of the root cause of our issues. Um, and because of what society tells us to be, to not have emotion, the most simple thing or the most natural thing of being a human is having feelings. If we're not human if we don't feel, if we don't have emotions. Um, I honestly feel like even psychopaths have emotions and sociopaths have emotions. We're all human beings, and to tell somebody that they cannot, that they should suppress them is crazy to me. But see, that's a society that is what has taught us as men to be, is to suppress our emotions. Um, and so we lash out in other ways, which we're going to get into later on. But it's got to the point where over time, suicides, men can, commit suicide 3 times more often than women. It was a study in 2017 that actually found out that the rate of suicide is highest in mid-aged white men in particular, right? White males accounted for 69.67% of suicide deaths in 2017. So white male privilege and white male toxic masculinity is a whole other topic for another day. But when we talk about, suppression of emotions as a male, and we're taught to suppress our emotions, I feel like, men have higher rates of depression and have higher rates of suicide because of that, which is interesting because in the study I found out that women are 3 times more likely to try to commit suicide but fail because they use less lethal forms um, of committing suicide, which is taking pills. Men are successful at committing suicide because they use more lethal forms, which is using a gun. Um, but this is the way out that a lot of men think it is, and which is suicide. And it's saddening. It's saddening that as a young man, that males in our society, that the only way out is one of the ways out they feel as if is suicide, is killing themselves, um, which I think is a huge part of toxic masculinity, and we have to dismantle that. The encouragement of violence. Toxic masculinity teaches that violence is the best way for men to prove their strength and power. It discourages them from releasing their feelings in other ways. Kind of going back to the suppressing of your emotions, you know, men, I feel like suicide is the number one thing that men try to, you know, they it gets to the point when you suppress your emotions so much that suicide is the only way out. But also, I feel like how other men lash out in their feelings is by violence, um, which is interesting because reading these articles and talking about all these mass shootings, they're mostly males, white males in particular, but mostly males, and it is because I think as a male you're taught to we're taught as men that if we don't get what we want, um, then we're considered less of a man. So now we got to go commit violence because that is the only way to prove that we're powerful, that we're strong. But in reality, that's just not the case. But in reality, we should just be talking about how we feel, how we're feeling and how we're feeling insecure instead of talking about how we feel insecure and talking about rejection. You know, we want to commit violence. Um, And so that's one of the second harmful effects of toxic masculinity. The discouragement of seeking help. According to the American Psychological Association, men are less likely than women to seek help regarding their mental health, which may likely be due to ideals of masculinity. Let's stop right here for a sec. Um, this might explain why 25% of women, but only 50% of men take psychiatric medications. So, kind of going back to the suppression of emotions, we're taught to suppress our emotions. We're taught to be aggressive, and we're discouraged of seeking help. I feel like this would change all our problems. Not all our problems. I feel like there's a lot to change when it comes to being a male, right? And in this culture, but you know, just discouragement of seeking help. Getting help is um, probably the most important thing that anybody can do to talk about their feelings. I'm glad I love counseling. I'm not ashamed to say that, you know, that I see a counselor on a daily basis or every other week or every week. I'm not ashamed because it feels good to talk about it. But most men don't talk about how they're feeling. Most men don't want to seek out help because in toxic masculinity culture, you're considered less of a man if you go seek out help. And it's saddening to me. It really is. It really is saddening to me. And I think we're getting better at it. I think that we're recognizing it now. And um, we're trying to encourage counseling, but I feel like we are a long ways off when it comes to it. So a lot of men are still discouraged and seeking help in that because the ideals of toxic masculinity, they're considered less of a man. The perpetuation of rape culture. I feel like this goes back to, first off, let's read the definition, right? I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Um, I warn you, this is like my seventh take doing this PowerPoint. It has been, I'm glad that I'm getting on a good start here. So toxic masculinity teaches men that their identity hinges on the ability to exert dominance over women. And one common way for men to assert their dominance is through sexual assault and harassment. Um, College culture that encourages masculinity, specifically fraternities, encourage courage encourage campus rape culture. It's big in colleges, um, you know, sexual harassment. Um, Kind of go back to the encouragement of violence. We as men are taught to feel. First of all, we're taught to feel no emotion. We're discouraged of getting help, and so therefore, the only way to lash out on our feelings is violence, is getting what we want, and taking advantage of women and in our society. And we're seeing a lot now with that. And I think we're coming to a time in our society where we're realizing the toxic parts of masculinity. I think we're far ways off of fixing it, you know, with colleges and how colleges handle sexual assault on campuses. And but that's a whole nother PowerPoint for a whole nother day. FYI, go watch The Hunting Grounds on Netflix. Talks a lot about sexual assault. I really want you to go watch that. And also talks about toxic masculinity if you tie that into what we're talking about today. But anyways, I guess I'm getting off topic here. Um, First off, like I said before, we're taught to feel no emotion. We're taught to not seek out help, and so therefore we encourage violence, we encourage aggressiveness, we encourage dominance, in our culture. And if you don't, then you're considered less of a man, which could be further from the truth. Homophobia. Masculinity has been constructed in contrast with femininity. So whenever a man does something considered a woman's role, like dating a man, he is automatically considered less of a man. Gay slurs like the F word, I'm not going to say the word, rhymes with maggot, are used to put men down for not conforming to masculine ideals. These serve not only to shame men who aren't gay, but also to humanize gay men. Perhaps toxic masculinity could help explain why twice as many women as men have had same-sex relationships, according to the CDC study. The pressure to be masculine creates a greater stigma around gay men than women. I feel like we're far ways off on this. I talk to a lot of my male friends, and a lot of these male friends are just even afraid to express how they feel about another man without looking gay. Um, and I feel like as a society, as a society of males, we got to get better at that because number one, it's okay to be a gay man. It doesn't make you less of a man. But in toxic masculinity, that's what has been taught over and over again, that you're considered less of a man if you do feminine things like cook, clean, wash the dishes, take care of your kids. Um, that's like a woman's job. Even though that sounds crazy, it is not true. That's what is being perpetuated in toxic masculinity culture. But also, you're considered less of a man if you date another man. And I feel like we got to get better at understanding that you're not less of a man, and that if you're gay or if you have other feelings for another man, or if you share your feelings with another man, on an intimate level, it's okay. But that's one of the toxic parts of masculinity. Misogyny. Uh, Toxic masculinity encourages a culture that not only puts down men for being feminine, but also puts down women. So toxic masculinity not only affects men for being feminine, but it also affects women. We still are like, we still have I feel like we're realizing that now, but we're a long ways off. More women are in STEM fields, more women are the breadwinners of the family in today's culture because of the economy, because of women empowerment, which I love. But in society, I feel like we're living in a double standard still because of, if you look at the models and if you look at TV shows and music videos, and we still give off this vibe of, I mean, you still see a couple of shows, you still see a couple of videos and stuff like that that are pushing women empowerment and uh, being a feminism and stuff like that in society. But I feel like we still have a long ways to go because there's still a lot of art out there that objectifies women, that puts down women, that says women can't be leaders. Men are more equipped to be leaders than women. Um, which is not true. Being a leader has nothing to do with your gender or your sexual orientation or your identity, but that's what's still being talked about, toxic masculinity. I'm gonna get personal with you guys. Um, Being at the church, I was involved in the church for about 3 to 4 years. And, after leaving the church, I had realized that they thought that women couldn't be leaders. They thought that women shouldn't be leading a church. So it was mostly men that led the church. Women had a role, but men had more of the women didn't have the role as being a leader of a church because they didn't think from a biblical perspective that women could be leaders. But it took me to leave the church to realize that that was pretty sexist and that was pretty misogynistic and patriarchal. Um, if you want the definition of that misogyny, basically misogyny is the hatred of, contempt for, or prejudice against women or girls. Misogyny manifests in numerous ways, including social exclusion, sex discrimination, hostility, and androcentrism, patriarchy, male privilege, belittling of women, disenfranchisement of women, violence against women, and sexual objectification. Patriarchy is a social system in which men hold primary power and predominant in roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, control of property. And some patriarchal societies are also patrilineal, meaning that property and title are inherited by the male lineage. So, we're in a society now where women are becoming more leaders. Women are taking on more male roles that were dominant from males. Women are taking more of that role. So, but I feel like we still have a long ways off. Okay, so how do we change this? Now, I feel like five doesn't even five doesn't even like there's not enough. I mean, like I said, there's more to change about toxic masculinity, but I think these are the five most important to talk about in it. So, with one being boys do cry, five eliminating gender insults, drop the boys will be boys ideas, start consent lessons early, talk openly and often about how violence and sex are represented in movies, games, and other forms of media. So, without further ado, let's get into boys do cry. Boys do cry. Um, I think we got to start realizing that we have feelings. And, because I don't know about you, but I want to have kids. And if I do have a boy, or if I have a girl, or whoever I have, I don't, it doesn't matter to me. I want to start teaching my boy emotions and that it's okay to feel, that it's okay to, um, it's okay to feel, it's okay to cry. You're not less of a man. If you cry, that's what makes you human. Um, but I think it starts with me and showing my emotions and not being afraid. I think a lot of men don't want to cry, don't want to see their young boys. They don't want, I think a lot of men that have young boys, they don't want their young boy to see them cry because of toxic masculinity. They were taught to not feel, they were taught to suppress their emotions, and therefore they want to teach their young boy to not feel those emotions. And so they don't cry. And I think as the next generation, my generation, if you will, that's having kids here soon, we have to be willing enough to show our emotions, to be willing to have emotion and to cry when we feel. Um, I think that shows more of an example to your young boys than actually telling them. So eliminate gender insults. If we point out gender-based negativity, discuss it with our sons every time we hear it, they'll develop an instructional aversion to anything that demeans women and girls or encourages problematic male stereotypes. I'll admit to y'all, I I have gender insults. I've said a couple of gender insults before too. Um, and I'm not a perfect person. I'll admit to it. Um, you know, we have jokes, we have things that demean other genders, and but just pointing it out and just telling them that those things are not okay could go a long way. So eliminating gender insults. This one I really like. I really wish I knew who first coined this phrase because it's one of the most ridiculous bits of, bull crap humanity's ever perpetuated. What Boys Will Be Boys says is that we can expect certain behaviors from boys and we allow them to continue. It says it's the male nature to be violent, promiscuous, sexist, etc. It's not worth doing anything about it. I don't accept that stereotype. And we need to teach our boys to reject it too. Yeah, this Boys Will Be Boys idea, I feel like it comes up with the excuse to be violent, to it gives the excuse to be violent. It perpetuates rape culture. It says that boys just can't help being boys, and um, we'll really need to stop saying that and start holding them accountable for their behavior. This is a big one. Start talking respect and boundaries, and by showing them what consent looks like through our actions. Start consent lessons early. I mean, this is probably one of the most off balance things in our culture today. The most off balance thing in our culture today um, is when we talk about consent. You have a lot of parents that will won't talk about it because they feel like kids are too young. Um, and or you got a lot of parents that talk about it, but they give you the worst kind of information out there. And so I feel like if we start by like as early as preschool talking about consent and respecting boundaries of other people, not just women, but men as well and boys as well. I feel like that could go such a long way, coupled with, getting therapy and talking about your feelings, just having respect and boundaries for people, you know, but also by showing, but also by leading with action, by leading by example and showing them what respect and boundaries means and how you treat your friends and how you treat their mom or their dad, how you treat people in life also goes away because I feel like boys are always going to look towards their fathers or their fathers for what's their male figure to them. They're going to follow you. To them, that's what they're going to be. And so we must lead with respect and boundaries for other people, you know our society. Lastly, talk openly and often about how violence and sex are represented in movies, games, and other media. Many of our most toxic ideas about masculinity are passed down through entertainment. This is double troubling because the effect is that we not only receive these toxic messages, but we also enjoy getting them because of the medium. I feel like as society we are in a double standard. We're in a double standard society because I think we're realizing toxic masculinity. I think we're realizing toxic masculinity. More women are becoming leaders. More women are, stepping up, and it's great. It's awesome. But also the video games. Oh my God, the video games are crazy. What kids can do nowadays with video games. Grand Theft Auto. I I don't want to be a hypocrite. I played that game growing up. Um, it was an interesting game. Beating up hookers. Selling drugs, um, having sex with prostitutes. You know, back in the '70s, I would say the most graphic game that was out there was what, like um, Pac-Man. I mean, nowadays it's like, you know, people killing other people and to still money to sell drugs. Like it's crazy. Also in the songs, for example, like Blurred Lines with Robin Thicke talking about girl wanting to be raped. 50 Shades of Grey. Let's not even get into that. Um, and so just talking about, you know, the violence and sex that are in movies and games, other forms of media could go a long way. I think that in today's society with technology, um, you really can't, you really can't stop them from being exposed to that because of how technology is just out there and how it is. But I feel like, um, just talking about it and teaching them what these are and how this is not real, this is how it's not should be, because they're going to listen to it regardless. I feel like, and you can only do so much as a parent, but just talking openly and honest. In conclusion, I just wanted to say that, you know, like I said, five is just, there was just not enough time to include more things I wanted to include in here about toxic masculinity. But I feel like it comes down to this, boys. I mean, it's just, they're innocent, and you know, they're watching in a today's society. They're watching media. They're watching movies, games, all these things that influence them. But also, the most important person that they're watching is you, and how you respect people, and how you treat people as a man or as a woman. And so we must lead by example. No, we know now we must lead by example in our society. We have to be brave enough to lead by example in our society. I feel like we're the answer to the next generation. We are the answer to the next generation when it comes to you know changing masculinity as a whole. I feel like my dad's generation didn't know what toxic masculinity was. I feel like we are realizing what toxic masculinity is, and then my generation, when we have kids, are going to be able to um, lead by example. So thank y'all again for listening, and I hope y'all have a great fall or spring semester, whatever semester you're in. And I'll talk to you soon. And this is the password to the test. And love y'all.